So this is a hugely important case, and it's just one case to break through that veil of a double standard in the rule of law and simply give one person in one case a chance at getting justice. I really commend Klippensteins for taking on this case, and I think it just needs more and more attention across Canada to give it the coverage it needs so that the jurisdictional issue will be decided in favor of hearing it here.
What consequences might they face?
The company?
Yeah.
Well, the lawsuit is for damages. It claims $2 million in general damages and $10 million in punitive damages. So if the lawsuit was fully successful, then they would have to pay $12 million. Because it's a civil lawsuit, there's not much more you can ask for. In certain contexts, you might be able to get them to stop doing something, but for something like this, all you can really ask for is compensation.
So this is a legal approach. It's a unique case. It needs to be supported. It's long overdue for Canada to open our courts, to hold our companies accountable. Going after, you have to do shareholder activism, investor activism, etc.
And we're going to have a lot of arguments about why it's appropriate to hear this case in Canada, even if Guatemala didn't have problems with its justice system. But yeah, we'll be focusing on practical difficulties of somebody like Angelica Choc getting justice in a place like Guatemala. I think the fact that there's been an arrest warrant out for this guy for over a year, and people know where he is, and nothing has happened, speaks volumes.
Could you walk us through what the lawsuit is going to look like? Like, what happens now, or what are we to expect, or what's the timeline?
A long wait. I suspect the first hearings will be heard sometime later this year, but it could be even later than that. And we suspect that HudBay will hire good lawyers, and that those good lawyers will do a good job at lawyering, which is to raise every possible defense, and that's what we expect.
It's a political will issue in Canada with respect to lawyers taking on these cases.
And I should say, to add to that, yes, we have the support of other lawyers who are helping us with directing us to cases and to different legal arguments. And we suspect that as this goes forward, we would benefit from other organizations, other law firms intervening and playing an intervening role, both in our initial motions and probable appeals. And I should mention that there's a website that has been set up by the law firm on behalf of Angelica Choc, and the web address is Choc versus HudBay.com, which is just the name of the legal case.
How do you spell Choc?
CHOC.
Because of the global investment structure, public pension funds and retirement funds, private funds, the Toronto Stock Exchange, there is no checks and balances. Fundamentally, there are a few, on what they can invest in, and that becomes our challenge. It's not a question of saying we don't want trade internationally or we don't want investment, but we want trade and investment which has serious environmental guidelines, checks and balances, health guidelines, checks and balances, human rights guidelines, checks and balances. It's actually a very good time for Canadians to be involved in these issues because there is this incredibly slow but widespread trickle-up effect of people becoming aware of the breadth of the issues and how we're all implicated in them. And so we're here tonight to talk about one company, one murder, one case, one legal strategy, and then some political strategies we're involved with. But understand this case as part of many other issues and particular struggles that people are involved with. Our main challenge is to say this is a Canadian issue, and why are we refusing to hold companies, investors, etc., accountable criminally and civilly in our courts? Why the double standard? Why the wall? That's the number one and main challenge.
Just curious as to what security steps are taking to protect the plaintiff in Guatemala, if any. I mean, I would think that she's probably at quite a considerable amount of harm or risk in relation to this lawsuit. So,
direct security measures? No. It's not like you can hire security guards or get the police to have a detail. But they are so used to their vulnerability to abuse and the impunity with which the companies act, or the government acts, or the police or the military. They have two choices: to roll over, play dead, and accept the forced evictions, accept abuses and do nothing about it, or courageously stand up and say, no, I'm going to take on this issue. And so in the short term, the risk goes up immediately for Angelica. Within a week of this case being announced publicly on December 1st of 2010, CGN, which is HudBay's wholly owned subsidiary, took out paid ads on the local radio going right at Angelica, telling her community, La Union, to not elect her as their president again. She's the president of her own little community. That's just a subtle, or not so subtle, but not a very harsh form of singling her out. But they went right at her within days of this being a public case. So what does our job become? Rights Action and other human rights groups is to denounce that and say to Canadians and the North Americans, write HudBay and tell them to call the people in Guatemala to stop pressuring Angelica. But with increased public attention on HudBay, what you're hoping they're going to do is to start phoning people and say, back off. Now,
would Angelica be willing to come to Canada and speak or so?
Yeah, Angelica and some other people it's something we're going to work on, is to trying to get them passports and visas and come up and do a speaking tour and stuff like that. Absolutely.
What responsibilities of the current company has? Can you just talk about that more generally than this particular case?
Yeah, it's a really hard problem, and that legally each company is considered independent. I mean, if you accept that they're each individual people, fine. It makes sense that if Grahame does something, I'm not responsible for what he does. But in the case of a wholly owned subsidiary, it's not like we're two independent people. It's like there's Grahame and there's me, and I've replaced his brain with bits of mine, and then he's my little zombie, and then I control everything that he does. And that yet, if he does something wrong, then I can still say, oh, wait a second, that's not me, that's him. And that's essentially the state of the law at the moment. And there is a real disconnect between what the law says and then what companies say. I have some quotes here from HudBay Minerals that they talk about their property in Guatemala. Our #1 priority is to ensure the safety and security of all residents and employees in El Astor. We remain committed to working with local residents to reach a fair and equitable solution to land claims and to resettlement. They say, at HudBay, we embrace our responsibilities through our company-wide commitments to the welfare of neighboring communities. Our core values are reflected in every region where we operate, including our new Phoenix project in Guatemala, which we acquired in 2008. So on their website, they say we're responsible. We're going to take care of the people in Guatemala. We're going to make sure that we have a good relationship with them. And yet, as soon as illegal action is started, then they immediately say, we don't. Not only are we not responsible for those people, but we don't have a duty to them. When we do our thing up here, we don't even have to think about them at all. This lawsuit focuses on the decisions that were made by HudBay, both in Canada and Guatemala, by employees of HudBay, and focuses less on the actions that were specifically taken by CGN. So in other words, the main focus is not on Miner and him shooting a gun. The focus is on what did HudBay do in Canada? How did it operate its company in Guatemala? In other words, we're not trying to hold them responsible for what the other company did. We're trying to hold them responsible for what they did.
To this type of activity, this type of sort of creative use of law to try and get through the walls of impunity and immunity for prosecution in Canada. And again, so thank you all very much for having us here tonight. Thanks for coming out.